All right, I'm going to call the Tumwater City Council work session of Tuesday, September 24th, 2024 to order. And this is a hybrid meeting this evening. So we have some individuals in council chambers and some in Zoom. So with that, we will go to roll call. I believe I have all council members. So with that, we can move to the first item, which is the overdose training presentation, and I will turn it over to City Administrator Parks.
I believe we have tonight with us Katie Strasiak. I hope I pronounced that properly, Katie, to talk a little bit more with us about overdose training. Katie came to us several weeks ago and did a presentation to the council, and it was suggested that she come and provide this particular training, and we are happy to have brought her in. Is Katie online?
All right. She's not with us right
She
now.
just
Okay.
messaged and said that she's waiting for Zoom to load.
Oh, all right. We'll give her a minute. Okay. Yeah, someone is not on mute. All right. She's not there yet.
Are you talking about me? I was just texting Leetta.
Yes, you're on. We've introduced you, so go ahead when you're ready.
Sorry, my Zoom was not letting me in, so I did not hear any of that part, actually.
Okay. So
I'm
are you on camera or?
Yeah, I'm gonna pull up my slides. Give me just 1 second. They're still pulling up. It's a pretty big file.
All right. And if it's possible to turn on your camera, that would be great also.
Sorry, I'm literally just trying to get the file to open. It's very large.
So as we wait, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, the work you're doing?
Yeah, of course. I'll just go through the basic intro part of the PowerPoint that I know without the slides. I'm Katie Strosiak. I'm the Thurston County Opioid Response Coordinator. So these trainings that we do are part of our Thurston County Opioid Response Plan. We do them all over the community. I actually did one earlier today at our Thurston Mason Behavioral Health Administrative Service Organization. We've got another team member out doing one in the community tonight at like a restaurant bar setting for community members. And so we really do them for anyone and everyone. We did over 100 in 2023, and we're slotted to do more than 100 this year. And it ends up being that we train over about 1,000 individuals in Thurston County and the surrounding areas every single year through these trainings, just for how to reverse an overdose and how to administer naloxone as well. So it's really great because that's 1,000 different people then who are trained on how to administer naloxone and save a life in the instance of an overdose. And so all of this pairs in with our Thurston County Opioid Response Task Force. This is going to come out of our overdose work group for that group, and kind of the goals that they have within that in order to reverse in progress opioid related overdoses and then prevent fatal overdoses from happening as well.
So are you still having issues with your PowerPoint?
Yeah, it's opening PowerPoint, but the actual like presentation is not opening for some reason.
Melody, do we have a copy of her PowerPoint?
Maybe if you can, we'll see if we have a copy of it. If not, we might have you send it.
I was thinking that we had received a copy. Katie, did you send a copy of that to Brittany?
I believe that Kateri had sent it previously.
Okay.
Oh, okay, I think we found it. Hold on.
Perfect. Normally it opens right up, so I'm not really sure what the like it's trying. My PowerPoint literally says like connecting and it's attempting to open the file.
You should be able to share it. I think we're going to be able to pick it, load it up for you here, Katie, and then we'll just you'll have to guide us through the steps there.
That would be awesome. Thank you so much. I'm not sure why it's not loading on my end. All right, cool. If we just want to fly through this part in the beginning.
We don't have it up yet. 1 minute.
Oh, it popped up for me.
Oh, did it pop up for you?
Mhm.
Does the other council members see it? Because we don't see it in council chambers.
I see it.
There it is now.
Yeah, we
Yes.
can see it.
Okay,
Okay. Go ahead.
there we go.
And then just say when you need to have the next slide moved.
All right, go ahead and go on to the next one. And the next one. Perfect. So these trainings are super straightforward. We go over 4 main things today. It's going to be to identify risk factors for an opioid-related overdose, understand the Good Samaritan law protections and how you're protected as a layperson for responding during an overdose, how to recognize an opioid-related overdose, and then how to administer the nasal version of naloxone. There's multiple versions, and we'll go into that. But in this training, we only go over how to administer the nasal version. Next slide. So kind of to start us off with like a baseline education to start to talk about naloxone and opioid related overdoses. Naloxone is only going to work on overdoses that are attributed to opioids, not any other drugs. So we've got a list of commonly used opioids on one side of the screen. You can see everything from Dilaudid, fentanyl, hydrocodone, oxycodone, things like that. A majority of our overdoses that are attributed to opioids in Thurston County are going to be attributed to illicit fentanyl. And so that's going to be the most common one that you're going to run into if you're responding to an opioid-related overdose. Naloxone or Narcan does not care if there are other drugs in the body that are not opioids. It will only respond to the opioids in the body. So you don't have to know what someone used. You don't have to know if it's for sure a drug overdose. It will only respond if there are opioids in the body. So we're going to look for the signs and symptoms of an opioid-related overdose, but if someone ends up having an overdose that's related to muscle relaxers, or Xanax or something else. You're not going to hurt someone with the naloxone. Next slide. So just a couple things about fentanyl. There's a lot of misinformation in our community. So just to touch on these, because we see a ton of false info, especially on social media. Fentanyl is going to be a super strong opioid. It's a majority of the opioid-related overdoses that we're seeing. It can be used intentionally. So we have folks who their drug of choice is fentanyl. They're using it multiple times a day. They're not overdosing every time they use it, but it can cause an overdose. The big one is that you cannot overdose just by touching fentanyl. Fentanyl does not like to be absorbed through our skin. The pharmaceutical industry spent a ton of time and a ton of money to develop fentanyl patches, which have different additives and have to be adhered to the skin for an extremely long period of time for that fentanyl to move through the skin barrier. So just coming into a skin contact with fentanyl, if you touch it during an overdose or anything like that, you're not at risk of experiencing an overdose yourself. You just wouldn't want to put your hands in your mouth, nose, or eyes, or other places where there's going to be mucous membranes. The big thing about fentanyl and fentanyl-related overdoses is that it can sometimes take multiple doses of naloxone in order to respond to a fentanyl-related overdose. So we see about half of our overdoses that come through EMS need 1 dose of naloxone, and half of them are reported as needing more than 1 dose. So when we go into how to use naloxone, we'll go into know when you use more than 1 dose, when to time it, and things like that as well. So it's not unnormal for us to see that 2 or 3 doses of naloxone may be needed due to the potency of fentanyl. Next slide. So naloxone is going to be the generic name of the medication that rapidly reverses an in-progress opioid-related overdose. It comes in a couple different forms. A lot of folks know the medication as Narcan. Narcan is going to be the trademarked brand name version of the nasal spray that has naloxone in it. There wasn't a generic form until the last couple of years, and so Narcan was the only one that was available. So that kind of got the brand recognition out there. Naloxone, the drug, is going to come in a couple different forms. So it comes in the nasal spray, both the brand name and the generic version. It also comes in an intramuscular injection that folks would inject with a long syringe into different muscles, so leg, lower back, arm, things like that, in order to deliver the same drug to reverse an opioid-related overdose. Next slide. Naloxone is going to be totally safe. Just like we talked about earlier, there's no impact if the individual has not used opioids. So for me, I have no opioids in my body. If I were to administer naloxone on myself right now, if I were to just shove the nasal spray up there and administer it, I would have no impact on my body besides a wet nose. So there's no adrenaline rush, no euphoria, no high, no nothing like that, as long as there's no opioids in the body. It's totally safe. You're not going to be able to abuse the naloxone or anything like that. It's safe across the board, same administration instructions, regardless of the size of the person, age, body weight, things like that. It also is safe to use on animals. We've seen it a few times where animals have come into contact with substances, especially puppies that like to eat things. And so naloxone is going to be the same medication that the veterinarian ends up using when they get to the emergency vet as well. Next slide. Cool. So an opioid-related overdose occurs when use exceeds tolerance. Tolerance is going to be different for every single person. So somebody who's smoking fentanyl multiple times a day is going to have a much different tolerance than me, someone who is totally opioid naive. It's going to take a different amount of fentanyl for them to have an overdose versus for me to have an overdose. After a person's tolerance has been exceeded, they'll go into respiratory depression, so their breathing will slow down. Ultimately, their breathing will stop. Their heart will stop, and then if there's no intervention, that's when someone would have a fatal overdose. Next slide. I like simplified pictures because it makes things a little bit easier to understand. This is a super simplified picture of how things work in our body. So we have opioid receptors in our brain. When we use opioids, whether we're taking the painkiller that we got from the pharmacist after surgery, or if we're smoking fentanyl that we bought from someone on the street. It does the same thing in our body. So the opioid goes into our body, it circulates, it finds the opioid receptors, it kind of sets on them, and then that's what gives us that pain relief feeling, that high, that euphoria, whatever we're looking for from using that opioid. It's because the opioid is sitting on the opioid receptors. Next slide. When our use exceeds tolerance, it's because our opioids have overwhelmed our opioid receptors. So we have more opioids in our body than our receptors can handle, and they become overwhelmed. When we administer naloxone into the body, the opioid receptors have a higher affinity for the naloxone molecules than they do for opioids. So when the naloxone goes in, it's able to circulate, find the opioid receptors, bump the opioids off of the receptors, and those receptors are able to be no longer overwhelmed. A person can regain their breathing, regain consciousness, and survive that overdose. One of the really important things to remember is that naloxone does not last forever. It's pretty short lasting in the grand scheme of things. Naloxone is going to be able to hold on to those opioid receptors for about 30 to 90 minutes in total. There's no magic number to find out if someone is a 30-minute person versus a 90-minute person. It's going to have a whole bunch of variables. So we try to shoot for the 90 minutes when we talk about it, but it's only going to last in the body for about 30 to 90 minutes before it does wear off and metabolize out. And we'll go over why that's important in a couple slides. Next slide. So there's a couple things that can put someone at an increased risk for experiencing an overdose, but especially for experiencing a fatal drug overdose. Change in tolerance is going to be a big one. We see it normally anytime someone had regular drug use. So in this case, regular fentanyl use. They stopped their drug use either because they no longer had access to drugs, they chose to be abstinent, maybe there's a disruption in the supply chain. Most commonly, we see it when folks go to detox, residential, inpatient, something like that, where they're no longer using, or when folks become incarcerated. After that period of time, when folks release or they discharge from treatment, if they choose to go use drugs again, there's been a period where they haven't been using. Their tolerance is much lower than when they entered the facility. And then we see a lot of folks have fatal overdoses at this time because they go to use the same substance at the perceived same amount, and that exceeds their current tolerance that they have once releasing. So that's going to be one of the really big reasons why it's important for folks to get connected to services and connected to things like naloxone post-release from jail in order to avoid having those fatal overdoses. Mixing opioids with other drugs puts someone at an increased risk of experiencing an overdose, especially if they're mixing any two things that can cause respiratory depression. If you're mixing more than one thing that causes your breathing to slow down, it's going to make your breathing a lot easier to stop. And so if we're mixing opioids with things like muscle relaxers, benzos or anxiety meds, alcohol, things like that, it's going to be easier to experience an overdose. A previous overdose puts you at risk of overdosing again in the future because naloxone does wear off after 30 to 90 minutes, and you can overdose again without using more drugs. We will touch on that later, though. Unknown strength. Right now, our fentanyl supply is extremely variable. We see all types of additives into it, and we also see an extremely varied potency for both powdered fentanyl and pill fentanyl. There's really no way for us from the naked eye to know what we're looking at as far as potency. And our knowledge for potency levels comes normally months after, when we're able to see different results from the state and from regions who have been able to test the substances. So you could be using something today that looks just like something that you used last week, and it could be 3 times as strong. So we always encourage folks to try to use less than they assume, so that they try to reduce their risk of an overdose. And then using alone. When we use alone, it's really hard for us to be found if we experience a drug-related overdose. So I always encourage folks to not use alone if possible. We don't want to have to hope that someone finds us after we experience an overdose. We always want to make sure that we're with someone who has naloxone, that knows how to use it, and knows to call 911 in that emergency situation. Next slide. Cool, you can skip to the next one. So in Washington State, we have Good Samaritan laws. So our laws in Washington State do a couple different things during a drug-related overdose. One, it protects you as a bystander for responding just as a lay person with naloxone. It's within your scope to be able to respond with naloxone. So the person who is experiencing the drug-related overdose and the person who's responding, calling 911, doing CPR, administering naloxone, all those things. Both of those individuals are protected from possession of a controlled substance charges. That's going to be the simple personal possession charge. No one is going to get charged for the personal possession because in this case, the medical emergency of the overdose takes precedent in the situation. We want 911 to be called. We want the ambulance to arrive so that that person can get medically cleared, go to the hospital, and get follow-up care. It does not protect against anything else, so no contact order violations, domestic violence protection order violations, other crimes, all those things. That's outside of its scope, but it does protect against those simple possession charges. It also covers for you administering naloxone as long as you're acting in good faith. You are not legally liable for what happens to that person. So as long as you are trying to help and not harm by administering naloxone, you can administer naloxone, and as long as you did not provide the drugs to that person, if that person survives or does not survive, you are still within your scope to legally administer naloxone to them. Next slide. Cool, and the next one. So we kind of touched on it earlier. Naloxone only responds to opioids in the body. So we don't have to know that there are for sure opioids in the body since it's going to help them if there are and not hurt them if it's going to be something else. So the big thing that we're going to look for outside of any drug paraphernalia, drug residue, signs of drug use is look for the signs and symptoms of an opioid overdose. The biggest thing that we're going to look for is a change in breathing. It will be obvious and apparent if someone is overdosing. Their breathing may sound labored, it may sound irregular, there may be choking, gurgling sounds, rattling. More often than not now with fentanyl-related overdoses, we see folks who are just experiencing no breathing or they're experiencing extremely labored breathing and slow breathing to the point where it can be hard to tell if they're breathing. You can look for a change in skin color. You're going to look at the nail beds or the lips first. Not everyone has a change in skin color, but some folks do. It's going to be a sign that they're rapidly losing oxygen in their body. Some people turn blue, gray. Some folks just have a loss of color. Not everyone changes color, but it is a good sign to look for. The biggest thing you're going to look for in an opioid-related overdose is someone who is unresponsive to stimulation. So if someone can walk or talk, they do not need naloxone. They are not overdosing. They might be experiencing a different drug-related overdose. They might be experiencing a different medical emergency. They might be extremely high on an opioid, but they're not experiencing an overdose at that time. So you can yell in a loud voice, ask if someone's okay. See if you can get their attention. You can give them a shake or a tap on the arm, leg, shoe, whatever you can get to. The biggest thing you can do is you can take your knuckles and rub it on the bone on their chest right here very hard. It's not comfy if you do it to yourself. It's even more uncomfortable if someone does it to you and you don't know that it's going to happen. And so if someone is responsive in any way, they will respond when you do that sternum rub. They'll either tell you to stop or they'll push your hand out of the way. If someone is actively experiencing an opioid-related overdose, they will not respond to that sternum rub, and you can proceed as if it's an overdose. Next slide. So it's really simple. When you see someone and you suspect it might be an overdose, you're going to go up to someone, see if you can get their attention, give them a loud voice, yell, see if you can get them to say that they're okay or have any response to you. Take your knuckles, rub it across their chest if you can, if they haven't responded to you. And then if they don't respond at that point, you can proceed as if it's an opioid-related overdose. Next slide. And the next one. So the first thing you're going to do is if you confirm that someone is unresponsive, you're going to call 911. You want to tell them your location as exact as possible, that you're with someone who's either not breathing, unconscious, unresponsive, any of those keywords. You can let them know that it's a suspected overdose. You don't have to, but you do want to let them know that that person is not breathing because you want the correct level of EMS sent to you. At this time, the dispatcher on 911 will also walk you through any additional steps and gather additional information. So 911 will also walk you through at this point how to do CPR and advise you to start chest compressions as well. Next slide. As close together with calling 911 as possible, you want to administer your first dose of naloxone. This is the easiest thing out of the whole response. You're going to take your naloxone out of your box, and it comes in these, oh, it's blurry. It comes in these nice foil packs. They're one-use packs, so it's got a nasal spray in it. It comes out and it just goes up the nose just like a Flonase would, and then you push the plunger on the bottom and the spray goes into the nose. Since dispatch is going to advise that you're going to start CPR on an individual, this individual will likely already be on their back, but regardless of that, naloxone comes out with a lot of force when the plunger is pushed on the bottom, so you don't have to worry about it dripping down a face or anything like that. You will simply take it out of the box, peel the foil off of the back, stick the plunger up the nose, and then push the plunger or stick the nozzle up the nose, push the plunger on the bottom, and then you will wait at that point. You can take it out of the nose once you've sprayed it. Most of the time, once you spray it, the plunger on the bottom gets stuck up as well. You'll know when it's sprayed. Next slide. So like we talked about earlier, some fentanyl overdoses at this point require more than one dose of naloxone. So the biggest thing with naloxone is it needs time to circulate in the body. If we remember earlier with the photos, with the little drawings, naloxone needs time to circulate, to find the opioid receptors, to move the opioids off of the receptors. The magic number that they've found is about 3 minutes. So the best way that I've found to time it is because you're going to be on the phone with 911 already. Look at how long you've been on the phone with dispatch. When your phone says that you've been on the phone for 3 minutes, that's when you're going to reassess your situation. If that person is regaining their breathing, they're waking up, they're gaining consciousness, you do not need to give them any more naloxone. You just wait for EMS to arrive at your scene. If that person is still not breathing, if they're still having extremely slow breathing, if they're not waking up, at that 3-minute mark, you're going to go into your box of naloxone because it comes with 2 doses. You're going to pull the second one out. You're going to peel the foil off the back. You can go in the same nostril, other nostril, either way, it doesn't matter. And you're going to push the plunger, and then you're going to repeat that pattern. So you're going to do 1 dose of naloxone, wait 3 minutes, reassess your situation. If there's still no breathing or labored breathing, you'll go in with another dose of naloxone. You cannot give too much naloxone. You just want to make sure that you are waiting those 3 minutes in between because we don't want to give too much naloxone too fast and make folks unnecessarily sick. Next slide. As folks are waking up, sometimes they're able to move themselves, sometimes they're unable to move themselves because folks often wake up in opioid withdrawal and can feel pretty sick. Or if you have to leave someone for any reason, so say you need to get more naloxone out of your car while you're responding, you want to move someone into position 4 because sometimes when folks wake up, they throw up from that opioid withdrawal, and we want to make sure that no one chokes on their vomit when they're waking up. So position 4 is great, but any position where gravity will take vomit out of the mouth also works. Next slide. We want to try to keep people as calm as possible as they're waking up. So one big thing is to get out of people's personal space. Since you'll be doing CPR and administering naloxone on someone, you're going to be in their personal bubble. You're going to be near their face. You're going to be pressing on their chest. That's a lot for someone to experience. And when folks are waking up, if they actively use opioids on a regular basis, they will be experiencing some type of opioid withdrawal. So make sure that you get up and out of their space so that you're not hovered right over them. Let folks know that they overdosed. Not everyone realizes that they overdosed as they're waking up. And just try to have empathy for folks as well. Folks are going to wake up more sick the more naloxone you give them. So this is why it's really important to be waiting those 3 minutes in between. The least amount of naloxone in order to get someone breathing and awake is really the goal here. If we're administering naloxone like 10 seconds apart, that's going to be way too much naloxone for someone. They're going to be extremely sick when they wake up. And then that's when we see folks who are really super grumpy when they're waking up as well. So you want to make sure that you're being mindful of that 3 minutes in between each dose. Naloxone wears off after about 30 to 90 minutes, which is going to be important for 2 reasons. You can overdose again without using more drugs. So if someone stays in your vicinity, say they don't go to the hospital or something like that afterwards, just keep an eye on them, go check on them. If someone has another overdose after that time, you'd respond the same way. You'd check for responsiveness, you'd call 911, you'd administer naloxone 3 minutes apart, the same as the first time. The bigger thing about this is that while naloxone is in the body for that 30 to 90 minutes, you cannot use more opioids and feel them. So the bigger thing that we see is not folks overdosing again without more drugs. It's that they wake up in opioid withdrawal. They go to use fentanyl because they don't want to be in opioid withdrawal, and they do not feel it because that naloxone is blocking it. We see them smoke more fentanyl because they don't feel it. They smoke more, they don't feel it. And so the goal for us is really to have folks go to the hospital if possible. But if they're not going to go to the hospital, try to make sure that they're waiting outside that timeline. Again, as city council members, that's not your role. But for service providers, we try to at least make sure that folks can be as safe as possible, because folks are very likely to experience a fatal overdose if they choose to use within that first 90 minutes after an overdose. Next slide. So some just like administrative stuff about naloxone. First of all, naloxone is going to be really shelf stable. It doesn't really have any temperatures that it doesn't like. If we think about it, we have folks who live in our community all year round, including in the winter and in the summer, where they have naloxone outside and it's totally fine. So if you're going to carry it, you can keep it in your car, keep it in your backpack. It's totally safe. Don't put it in the fridge, don't boil it, don't microwave it or anything like that. But it is totally shelf stable regardless of that. The other thing is expiration date. Naloxone is good for about 4 years past the date of manufacturing. On each box, it'll either be on the top or the bottom of the box in a black little box on the box. It'll say the date. It also is on each of the foil packs on the bottom for the expiration date. So it's about 4 years from manufacturing. WSU has done a study, though, where they tested longevity after point of expiration, and they did find that naloxone was extremely effective even after the point of expiration. So we always encourage folks to try to not throw their naloxone away if possible, but to get new naloxone if it expires. And then on the next slide, there's going to be a resource called Stop Overdose. It's ran by University of Washington's Drug and Alcohol Institute. Sorry, they changed the name about 1.5 years ago. This is going to be the holy grail for all things overdose resources. They have training videos, training handouts, guides for professionals. They also have a naloxone finder, and we do have a free naloxone by mail program here in Washington State as well, and this will give you all the information for it. So again, it is ran by University of Washington. It's all fact-based, evidence-based. It's a great resource. On the next slide, it has some information about the Recovery Helpline. This is a great starting point for anyone you know who may be trying to find treatment. It's going to be a 24-hour toll-free hotline on the top to be able to talk to someone to help navigate those resources. And then on the bottom, the website portion, they also have a medications for opioid use disorder finder map, where you enter your zip code and you can find things like Suboxone and Methadone near you. And next slide. Cool. And then just some resources that we offer because we are Thurston County Public Health. We do offer a syringe services program. We are in the back of Capital Recovery Center. We operate 2 days a week. We have all kinds of different supplies. You don't have to be someone who uses drugs to come visit us. We also have things like wound care, safer sex supplies, nicotine replacement therapy, and we do offer on-site hepatitis C screening and HIV rapid screening as well, and case management for both of those programs as well. And then next slide. So we went over some of this already for expiration dates and stuff like this, because technically you guys count as a workplace. If you were to keep it on campus there in Tumwater, you would just want to make sure to know where you have it. I consider it the same thing like in my personal life. Like my friends, when they know that when they get in my car, they know where the naloxone is. They know that if we were in a parking lot and saw something, anyone who gets in my car knows that it's in the glove compartment, and to get it out like that. So I really encourage you that whether you're a workplace or just a household or someone who has a social circle, if you're going to choose to carry naloxone, to make sure that those around you know where it is. It only is good if you know how to use it and if you can access it in time. So please don't lock it up and have it easily accessible and things like that. I think that's the last slide. We partnered with a great local artist, Garrett Leonard, a few years back to make this awesome swag stuff for us. If you've been around town at all, the big window clings are in a bunch of businesses, hotels, motels, things like that. They're meant to notify the public that if they witness an overdose, that they're able to run into that building and get naloxone from behind the counter. They have it on site to be able to respond to an active opioid-related overdose. We also have things like buttons, magnets, stickers, all the things like that. So if you guys are ever interested, we have tons and tons of swag of stuff like this as well, and it's all from a local artist. Next slide. Cool. So that's all I have. My information is on here as well. I'm Katie. My coworker is Kateri. We have really similar names. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have. And I'm so sorry for my technical difficulties. My slides have still not even opened. So
Great, thank you. Any questions? And thank you for presenting. Councilmember Dahlhoff?
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, Katie. Appreciate it. And never apologize for technology issues. The one thing I'm wondering if you could share with us is some of the misconceptions about substance use, right? Like when things, some of the, in our meetings talk about, you don't know when someone's going to overdose. So why is it important for us to have these available, like at City Hall or at businesses in Tumwater? Like what are some of the misconceptions and why is it important?
yeah, I think one of the big things is that folks that I've encountered always assume that because they don't use drugs or their social circle doesn't use drugs, that they would never witness someone overdosing or have someone in their life experience an overdose. I see that kind of on twofold. One, just as community members, stuff happens in our community. I mean, I was driving to work the other day and found someone unresponsive at a bus stop that like the first 15 people in front of me had just drove past who was very clearly overdosing. And so even just as community members, being able to have a very simple tool in our tool belt to be able to save a life of someone who, you know, that could be whether that person lives or dies, is if we're able to stop in that right moment is really important to me. And also just the stigma behind substance use and acknowledging that a lot of folks are using substances in private and you might not know that people around you are using as well. I know that that's one of the things that we hear about a lot, is especially from family members and close friends of being like, you know, they overdosed and I had no idea that they were even using drugs. And so being able to have naloxone and know how to use it in case that does unfortunately become your situation, because it's always better that if that's going to happen in an area that you're around, is having the tools to be able to prevent the overdose death. I don't know how many people I've heard that from, where it's, you know, the child or the brother or something, and it's like, I know about naloxone and I didn't know that they were using, so I never had it. So when I found them overdosing, I was able to call 911, but like that's all I could do was sit and wait for the ambulance to come. So being able to just have one more tool as a layperson, I think is super important.
And Katie, one more. Could you like tell us like how we can get our own Narcan naloxone?
Yeah, definitely. So there's a bunch of different avenues. We have pretty easy access in Washington State. It is available totally over the counter now, although I encourage you, please do not go buy it over the counter for $50. I think that is a little excessive for everyone. So we have what's called a standing order in Washington State. You can walk up at the pharmacy counter and access naloxone without your own prescription or anything and get it billed to your insurance. So in Washington State, Medicaid has full coverage, so there's no copay for Medicaid. Private insurance has a copay some of the time, but it can range from $0 to about $20 is what I've been hearing. I would call ahead for private insurance and double check. A lot of the ones that I hear is $5, so pretty cheap. You can always come to our syringe services program to get naloxone as well. On stopoverdose.org, you can look at the naloxone finder, find a community-based agency near you that has it, or you can access it through the mail-based naloxone program that's available on stopoverdose.org. You use your name, your mailing address, and it comes in an unmarked bag in about a week's time.
Great. Any other questions? All right, well, I thank you very much. This is very informative and very helpful. I appreciate you joining us this evening.
Well, thank you so much.
You bet. All right, next item on our agenda is the Deschutes Estuary Restoration Project Interlocal Agreement with Boardwalk and Related Infrastructure Agreement. And are you, Council or City Administrator Parks, are you going to start us off?
I am happy to do that.
Okay.
So it looks like we have a great crew here from DES and DES consultant team. This is the next step in the Deschutes Estuary Restoration Project. It is the culmination of a lot of work and some really good work that's been collaboratively and undertaken. And so with that, I will turn it over to Ann Larson with DES. She's the project director for this really regionally game-changing project for our county and our community. So Ann, if you want to go ahead and introduce your crew and take it away.
Happy, love to. So good evening, everybody. As mentioned, I'm Ann Larson. I'm the project director for this, and I've been working on it for about 7 years. I have got some amazing people with me today, and I think they might introduce themselves separately when they start speaking, but I have Tessa Gardner-Brown, who's with Floyd Snyder. She's been leading the project management effort on behalf of the consultant team. Sarah Reach, who's from Eco Northwest, who's also leading our funding strategy. And then, of course, Dave Merchant. We got to have a legal guy in the room. He's with the AG's office and has been providing a lot of support on this as well. We've got some slides that I think Tessa's going to pull up, but just to start with some opening remarks.
And sorry, just for logistics first, could I get permissions to share my screen, please? Okay, go back on mute, back to you.
No permissions for you. As mentioned, we've been working really diligently with Tumwater over the past few years, actually longer than that, and especially over this last year. So we're really excited to give you a bit of a project update and talk more about the interlocal agreement. We've been great partners, and this is exciting when we think about what the future estuary is going to be. As mentioned, there's really a great effort regionally to transform this area, which includes a lot of the projects. And we're going to be investing in something pretty special here. It's really transformative, and the estuary is going to be a legacy project for all of this area in Thurston County. A cool thing about it too, it's really unique. We're doing an estuary restoration in an urban setting, and we've heard that this may be the largest estuary restoration in an urban setting in the nation, and that's really exciting. We're demonstrating that the natural and urban can coexist and at the same time. And again, this really makes this a really special legacy project. So to get to it, we've got a bunch of slides. I'm gonna give you some project context. Then we're gonna jump into a little bit of an overview because I'm not sure everybody really knows what's in the estuary restoration in and of itself. And then we'll get to the meat of the conversation, talking about the interlocal agreement and the next steps. So these first few slides are just being used in a lot of our stakeholder conversations. They really help set the tone. So next slide. Thank you, Tessa. So historically, freshwater from the Deschutes River would mix with saltwater from Budd Inlet over expansive tidal flats. And this area was rich with history as the southern terminus of the Puget Sound. Next. The Deschutes watershed is approximately 270 square miles. The lower 260 acres of the watershed were significantly disrupted in the 1950s when the state built a dam at the mouth of the Deschutes River. And since that time, there have been chronic water quality violation standards. The sediment has accumulated up to 13 feet in some areas, and there are more than a dozen invasive species, including the New Zealand mud snails, which you all know about, that are causing the water body to be closed to all public access. And it's been occurring for more than a decade. Next slide. The Deschutes Estuary, it has a long-standing cultural and spiritual significance to the local tribes that are partner with us now, particularly the Squaxin Island tribe. They consider this area, the people in the land of Deschutes Estuary as Stechas. They've been really, really involved in our planning efforts since the 1990s, and they're definitely a key partner with us here today. This area has also historically been used by Chinese Americans, and Chinese Americans actually immigrated to Olympia back in the early 1900s. Chinatown was established along the waterfront of the estuary, and the community built a series of houseboats on the shoreline. This area was referred to as Little Hollywood, and it was ultimately removed as part of the long process to construct the dam and Capitol Lake. Next slide. The project area also has a rich maritime history. Old Olympia Brewing was operated at the Tumwater Historical Park, and vessels would actually make their way up 2 miles to the waterway in the brewery, which was at the Tumwater Falls. Olympia Yacht Club was established in its current location in 1912, and there's been a rich maritime presence, and it's grown increasingly with additional marinas and an active sailing club, and also other boat launches in the area. But in modern times, Capitol Lake has been really embraced by the community. It's the heart of our downtown Olympia, and it's been really used for a space of community and congregation. Next slide. Olympia is also our capital city, the development of the Capitol campus has significantly influenced the landscape over time. In 1893, the initial visioning began to design and construct the Capitol building. In 1911, Wilder and White submitted a plan that would perch the Capitol building on the hillside and orient all the future planning and views to the water and the mountains. Next slide. Heritage Park is designed as an extension of the Capitol campus, and there are features across the park that intend to represent our rich history from across the state to transition that experience to the campus upland. Next slide. And 2022, DES identified estuary restoration as the management approach that had the greatest range of benefits and was the most supported by our stakeholders. And so we began right now together in this process to re-envision the landscape. And when we do that, we must think of the rich history of this place, that natural history, the tribal history, the settlement community, the maritime community, our civic community, and also the Capitol campus. And our goal is to represent that history in a space and do it in a way that balances our shared interests. And when we look at all of this is that water is really a unifying force. All of our history over time has brought us to the water, from harvesting on the water, recreating on the water, crossing the water from either side of Olympia. It's what brings us together, and it's at the heart of Olympia. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tessa, and she's going to give you an overview of the project itself and then talk through some of the benefits. So Tessa, the floor is yours.
All right, thanks everyone. Got just a couple slides here to orient the group to this transformational project. I think Anne just gave such a helpful overview of all of the significance of the project area and the history that we consider. And now what we want to do is share with you the expansive elements that make up the Deschutes Estuary Restoration Project. So I'll go through this slide, and then we have a couple renderings for you, which are really exciting to share the vision, and we can close that out with talking a little bit about benefits. So to start, this project would begin with a significant dredging event to reestablish the main channel of the Deschutes River that has accumulated sediment since the dam was constructed in 1951. And that sediment would be dredged and placed along the shoreline to create new expansive salt marsh habitat. And the benefit of that dredging and then placement along the shoreline is that we can improve ecological conditions across a 2-mile project area beyond what would just be achieved if that sediment was taken off site. It also, that planting increases the aesthetics of the project area, which is so important given that it's the heart of the region, including Olympia and a presence in Tumwater. And it reduces our project costs. A significant component of the project is construction of a new Fifth Avenue bridge. We have to do that before we can take out the dam, and that'll provide a significant benefit to regional connectivity as transportation happens across East and West Olympia, including emergency response vehicles. The Percival Cove Bridge will also be reconstructed. And then another big portion of this project is the restoration, the restoration of recreation. And we'll do that in a couple ways. We'll have the opportunity to construct new boardwalks in the Middle Basin and in Tumwater Historical Park. There will be new water access and restored water access, which Anne described has been precluded since 2009, and then new fishing facilities. And the community has just been so excited about the opportunity for salmon and other fishing in the project area. After all of that is done, the Fifth Avenue Dam would be removed, and in the future, maintenance dredging would occur in West Bay. And we'll talk more about that concept later in the afternoon. Okay. Let me get that out of the way. And so in June, we delivered the 15% or the conceptual design to Anne and the Department of Enterprise Services. And what we'll share with you on the next couple slides are some renderings from that. So this is our existing conditions, what's out there today, looking out onto the North Basin of Capitol Lake and downstream into the marinas in the Port of Olympia. And this is a rendering of what would occur after the dam is removed and the new bridge is constructed and then the shoreline habitat is placed along the shoreline. And this is conditions that would occur under low tide conditions. So you can see that expansive habitat, the restoration of shorebird activity, which we saw in our recent drawdown, and then the restored Deschutes River main channel. And then in the middle basin, just north of Tumwater Historical Park, these are existing conditions. And we anticipate conditions to look like this in the future under mean sea level, and like this under low water elevations. And then, as I described, the Fifth Avenue Bridge is a significant benefit and component of the project. And this is a rendering of the new bridge concept that includes expansive pedestrian programming at the south end with the opportunity for pause and resting and viewing back into Olympia, the campus, and up to Tumwater as well. An aerial view of that concept. And then we're referring to this area in the middle of the bridge as an oculus. And the purpose of that is so that the community can gather around it, as particularly and especially when the salmon are returning in the late summer and early fall, to see the salmon runs over the middle of the restored river channel. Okay, so let's transition into the interlocal agreement. And one of the things that we want to always start these conversations with is the importance of the interlocal agreement in demonstrating regional support for the project. And this project unlocks a suite of regional benefits. I'm going to describe those here for you. So as a reminder, the project area extends from Tumwater Falls in the city of Tumwater all the way to the Fifth Avenue Bridge, and the project area is outlined in that blue color. And you can really see from this photo the connectivity to Tumwater, Olympia, and the greater region. So once the project is completed, we will have restored 2 miles of estuarine habitat that is so critical to salmon and species that rely on salmon, or species that the salmon rely on. One point that I wanted to make here is that it will also give freer access to the salmon runs that move up Percival Creek. And we know that the city of Tumwater is doing such important work to improve habitat conditions in Percival Creek for those salmon runs. The project will also reduce flood elevations across the city of Olympia by approximately 1 foot, which is important to residents and local businesses and commerce in the area. It'll address chronic water quality violations. It will reintroduce active recreation, as I described. It'll make meaningful strides towards restorative justice for the tribe, which has been an important component for all of the local jurisdictions around the table. And the future maintenance dredging, which Sarah will talk about in just a bit, is a key component to ensuring a recreational waterfront in the future that continues to generate good economic activity and social value to the region. So in 2016, DES brought together a funding and governance work group comprised of the entities shown in this table here to evaluate opportunities for shared funding and governance. And that, oh, sure, please. Yeah.
What questions if while you're presenting or at the end?
Could you say that again?
Do you want questions while you're presenting or at the end?
Oh, we're happy to do whatever's best for you, I'd say.
Okay, let them fly.
All right.
Yeah.
Councilmember Althauser has a question.
Please.
Hey, Tessa, can you go to the previous slide, and can you hear me okay?
I can, yep.
Okay. Since you mentioned sea level rise, and with some of this work, it'll help sort of it'll help Olympia in that regard. Can you talk a little bit about one of the landmarks that's near and dear to us in the old brew tower and some of the modeling that was done there about potential impacts either from a king tide coming in, or if we have a really significant rain event? I know that, you know, we would certainly be remiss if we didn't give airtime to some of those components to make sure that we talk about the due diligence for planning for that.
Absolutely, good question. I should start by saying we are continuing with our modeling effort, and what we've done is committed to continuing the coordination with the city of Tumwater on this topic. And relative to the Tumwater Brewery and the old brew house, what we know under existing conditions is that it is located in a mapped floodplain. And so that suggests that there are storm events that result in flooding in that area. What we see in our modeling is that the maximum flood elevations that would occur will be reduced as a result of the project. So the flood elevations that occur now are higher than the maximum flood elevations that will occur in the future as a result of the project. The trick and the nuance here is that the area will be more susceptible now to the change in tidal elevations. So there may be higher water elevations more frequently as a result of high tide events, but the highest level of flooding will be reduced overall. Does that make sense? I'm happy to just say that one more time if it might be needed to sink in.
Yeah, I think that made sense to me. Is part of the reasoning behind that, or I guess part of the science behind that, is that once you open it up, some of that debris is not the right word, but some of the silt and rocks that's currently in the South Basin will continue to flow down further at increased rates. Like there's increased water capacity in the South Basin as a result of the project, correct? Yes, that is correct. That's a good point to make, that the siltation and the sediment accumulation that you all see here is likely and expected to move downstream as water velocities increase in the future. We don't see that as the kind of key driving force for creating more capacity, but it's a good point to be made that those conditions will change a bit in the future. Okay, I see Angela has her hand up, but I have one more quick question. So the project area goes up to the falls, but in the current rendering and the design, it looks like we don't have habitat restoration that continues beyond I-5, and some of the plant life, you know, on the eastern part of the South Basin there is that's just undisturbed. So maybe that habitat that doesn't need to be restored. But could you talk a little bit about the policy rationale for why the habitat restoration stops at the highway? Good question. Yes, the takeaway is that the habitat in Tumwater in the South Basin, in and around Tumwater Historical Park, is good quality habitat. It's the type of shoreline habitat that we are intending to develop across the project area. So there is no need to enhance the habitat that is already so good in that project area. And in fact, if we were to go in and muck around with it, we would just be putting back what you have now. And so there isn't a key driver for restoration in the South Basin. Great, thank you. Thank you.
Councilmember Jefferson, did you have a question?
Yes, I did, Mayor. Can you point and show me where that fishing pier is gonna be at on this map?
Yes, the fishing pier, can everyone see my mouse?
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Okay, the fishing pier will be right about here. And that has good connectivity, obviously, to Tumwater Historical Park. What we see is so much traffic going under I-5, and then will continue to keep that trail connection. And so people could pop into Tumwater Historical Park under I-5 and right out to that fishing pier. And I just must say that people are so excited about the opportunity to have fishing back on the estuary.
Excellent. And my final questions is we see the swans make their home at Capitol Lake in the winter, and they should be back soon. So what's going to happen with that wildlife?
That's a good question relative to the swans, and I would need to follow up with you on that. I don't want to speak out of turn.
Okay, thank you. Please follow up. Let me know, okay?
We will. I commit to that.
Now I'm excited to know too, so we'll definitely follow up. It's a good question.
Okay.
All right, I think that was the questions. Go ahead.
Okay, great. So I think I was just finishing on this slide to suggest that the DES convened the Funding and Governance Work Group to evaluate opportunities for shared funding and governance as a result of continued and building provisos from the legislature. And we've pulled those quotes here for you. So with that, I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Sarah, and I'm going to go turn the lights on for 1 second. Go
Getting
ahead, Sarah.
darker here. It's noticeable. Thank you, Tessa. Okay, so we're going to continue with the details of the ILA here. And I want to start by sharing that it's really rooted in these guiding principles that the Funding and Governance Work Group established in their early work together about 6 years ago, beginning about 6 years ago, maybe longer. The structure of the agreement that and the ILA that you have before you directly reflects many of these guiding principles, if not. It provides the dedicated funding source, and it represents a shared distribution of costs between those who contributed to the problem. And there was a lot of discussion about how the state built the dam and created a lot of the problems that are there today. And then those who benefit from the solution, those that would experience ecological and economic benefits from implementing that estuary restoration. As I'll go into a minute, go into more in a minute, it provides manageable governance, and we'll talk about that structure. And then really importantly, through the Funding and Governance Work Group process over the last half decade or so, and then via the ILA itself, the participating entities are committing and have committed to a long-term collaborative process. And that responds directly to the legislative mandates that were on the previous slide there that Tessa talked about. And this is really so important to continuing to bolster momentum for the project and towards funding and ultimately implementation. So this outlines the way that the ILA structures that shared and manageable, and governance makes the governance manageable. The group went through quite a bit of deliberation about what that governance could look like and ultimately arrived at a solution that was as small and simple as possible. And so you'll see here that the new infrastructure that is created through the project, the Fifth Avenue Bridge, then the boardwalks, are parceled off to ultimate ownership and maintenance to the entities that are most closely aligned with maintaining that infrastructure into the future. And so the City of Olympia will take ownership of the Fifth Avenue Bridge, and then here for Tumwater, the Tumwater will take ownership and responsibility of any new boardwalks that are constructed in the South Basin adjacent to the parkland there. And that is reflected in the subsidiary agreement that you all have as part of the ILA. So what is left then after you take the infrastructure out is that the sediment is what needs to be managed collectively into the future. And it's the sediment that deposits downstream after the dam is removed. And these responsibilities you can flip back just a second there, go to DES and the port, primarily with the ILA signatories, providing oversight through the Deschutes Estuary Steering Committee, which is a creation of the ILA. And that group will meet at least yearly and provide that oversight to the process. One final thing I'll note here is that Thurston County has agreed to manage the local funds that each of the local entities are providing, including Tumwater. And the state funds will be managed completely separately and in a separate account. And so we can continue on now. So this diagram shows on the left-hand side here, the sediment deposition that occurs under current conditions. That's the no action column that you see there on the far left. And the red shows the intensity of sediment deposition there. So darker red is more sediment deposition. And you can see on the left there.
Councilmember Althauser has a question.
Sure. Sorry to interrupt. Can you just go back one slide? You mentioned that the funds will be in a separate account. Can you talk a little bit about the protections that provides for local entities who contribute funding in that way?
Yeah. So all of this, the local funding from the local entities, City of Olympia, Tumwater, Thurston County, Lot, and the port. is maintained in this local account. And one of the biggest concerns that came up through one of the concerns that came up through the negotiations here is that if the funds are commingled with state money, everything is put into the same pile. What is the risk of the local funds being swept by the legislature and not being available when the time comes to need to manage the sediment? So the solution that we landed on is that we do have to maintain that separation. All state funds will be maintained entirely separately, and that legally protects the local funds from any being touched at all by the legislature. And there are mechanisms, which I'll get into in a few minutes, that then links the contribution from the local entities, the money that's held in that state account, and then there's a third component. The marinas are also contributing, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But funds have to be available in all three of those accounts of sediment management action to be accessed. So the funds will all need to be there, but they are collected separately.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so back to here. So sediment is depositing into the space downstream of the dam under current conditions, but you see under the estuary conditions that deposition would increase, and you see that with the intensity of red there, particularly in the areas that are occupied by the yacht club and then private marinas, and then extending up into the port berths. The dotted line there is the Federal Navigation Channel. So the sediment modeling that has been completed for the project provided the basis for understanding how often sediment dredging would need to occur. And it's different depending on the area that you're looking at because of that difference in intensity and deposition. So the green area on the map on the right is the Olympia Yacht Club. And that would be dredged approximately what the models tell us, every 6 years on average. And then the other areas would be on a 12-year frequency. So I think that is all I will say there, unless there are questions. Okay.
I don't see any questions.
Okay. So then we'll start talking about some numbers here. So the ILA is it has a defined period. It's an agreement that lasts through 2050. And that date is really important because, or was selected because we needed a finite period to bound the agreement, and 2050 aligns with the expiration of the DNR leases that allow the marinas to be in place in that area. And at that point, those leases, it would be up for renegotiation, and it would be an opportune time. And the ILA explicitly states that the group will come back together and evaluate how the sediment management arrangements have been working and have conversations around what comes next. So the agreement does not dictate that this will continue after 2050, but it provides an avenue for that discussion so that the entities will need to talk about what comes next. So this is the table here shows the overall cost picture. And so you'll see here, again, consistent with the state being in the guiding principles, the contributor to the problem, the state takes on the bulk of the construction, design permitting and construction costs. And it really represents the vast majority of the costs to implement this project and achieve the benefits. As I mentioned earlier, with the no action sediment deposition, there is sediment that is that the marinas are currently responsible for dredging, and the port is currently responsible for dredging, and they will maintain that responsibility. That will not be shouldered by the group as a whole, and that's that $6.1 million in 2022 dollars. And then you'll see that the collective responsibility here is really the increased the cost associated with dredging, the increased sediment that accrues because the dam is removed, and that's the 18.6 million. The state takes a share of that as well. The allocation of that $18.6 million is equal across all members of the funding and governance, with the exception of the Squaxin Island Tribe, which is not taking any responsibility from a cost perspective for equity and restorative justice reasons. And then the city of Olympia is taking a 50% increase, so a greater share of the cost because of its proximity to the working waterfront and recreational boating in West Bay and all the benefits that come from that. Other jurisdictions experience some of those benefits in smaller ways, but the city of Olympia has it right there at their front door. I guess I'll just come back to that point of that way that the money can be accessed, that increased sediment management dollars from the locals can only be accessed if that baseline sediment management cost within the marinas and ports is available in the and then making sure that the state also contributes in that separate account as part of the increased sediment management. And of course, none of this would begin until the state receives sufficient funding to initiate construction activities. So we can go to our final slide here. Actually, we have one more after this, but final content slide on the ILA. This is the money slide. It represents the initial payment schedule, and you'll see in the table there all of the entities, including the private marinas, that will be contributing funds to ongoing sediment management through 2050. These costs here on the bottom row, where you see the estimated total escalated contribution through the ILA term, that takes the costs that were shown in the 2022 EIS, which were reflected in the 2022 MOU. And the only change that we've made for that is to escalate the cost at 4.5% annually, given when the dredging would occur during the period through 2050. And that 4.5% escalation rate was the subject of considerable conversation across the members of the funding and governance work group. And it provides, there is a provision that allows for review of that, given that it is on the high end of hopefully what escalation will end up being during the time it provides security, but there is also a provision that provides review of that assumption, and the group, the Deschutes Estuary Steering Committee, can make changes to that if it is deemed appropriate based on the market conditions at the time. So I'll stop there and see if anyone has any additional questions before we go to our final slide.
Any questions? I think we're good.
Okay, great. Anne, bring it home.
All right, you're easy on Sarah. She had the hard slides. Well, our final slide is just to show you a figure. The one on the left really shows that we had a very aggressive when we started at the beginning of the year. It was hard to think we would get to this point with all the collaboration that we've had, but it really shows the process. You can see that we had a combination of alternating group meetings and then individual meetings. And what we would do is take that individual feedback and we'd incorporate it into the version of the ILA and then present that to the group meeting. And so this was really helpful because we had such a rigorous schedule, but I just want to say this was very intentional and very deliberate to make sure that we were addressing concerns of each individual entity, but then also bringing it together for the larger group discussion. So where we are right now, we've already met with the Port of Olympia, and I heard that they signed the interlocal agreement last night, which is exciting. We met with LOT, Squaxin Island Tribe, and today we're here with you. Our DES director has also signed, and we've just got a couple more meetings until we're done to do these briefings. But it's been a really long journey. It's been a pleasure working with Tumwater on this project. And yeah, we're just so happy to be able to share this information. And I think with that, that's our last slide, but we're here for any additional questions.
Councilmember Althauser.
Thanks. I have a question about the subsidiary agreement about the boardwalks. You know, we're at we've seen the 15% design renderings, but the subsidiary agreement contemplates some pretty robust community involvement for what design looks like. I think we haven't already done, has DES or the project management team conducted that community outreach yet? And I guess I'm just sort of curious, my reading of the subsidiary agreement is that the design could change, and that it allows flexibility for that, for what the boardwalks look like. Is that correct? And is there a community engagement that is yet to be done for the boardwalks in particular?
Do you want me to start on that, Anne?
Oh, yeah, we've already had a public meeting and we've been engaged. Maybe I'll let you finish. So we have initially had some public engagement as we've gone into 15% design, which was delivered to DES recently. And we're going into next phases of design, like 30%. And at these different phases, we're going to continue to engage the community on the overall project design and then incorporate the community feedback, whether it be from City of Olympia on the bridge or the community on aspects of boardwalks or other recreation components throughout the process. So there are these touch points that make sense during the design process, and we're already starting to engage with the community. We've only had one public meeting so far, and I think it was really successful, but we've established a community sounding board with folks from around, like the city, art folks, women on the fly, all kinds of folks to provide some input as well. And we'll continue to do that. We don't have full funding yet, so funding is also a consideration. We need to make sure that we're thoughtful about how we use our limited funds until we receive more. But Tessa, I don't know if you have anything additional to add.
Yeah, just a couple thoughts, including I really wish I had the qualifications to turn the lights on, but I don't. And so we, as Anne described, I think maybe we can suggest that we're incorporating feedback in two primary channels. The first is a design partnership with the City of Tumwater. So we consider the City of Tumwater a design partner specific to development in the South Basin. And to kick off the design process, before we moved into design, we met with an interdisciplinary group from the City of Tumwater, including Chuck Denny, the Director of Parks, and City Manager Lisa Parks, and a number of other technical folks. I think Dan Smith was there, to understand from them, if boardwalks were developed, what are key design criteria or key design goals that would support the City of Tumwater in taking those parks on and it meeting the intentions for you guys. So we used that and brought that into the design concept. And then, as Anne described, we've got a community sounding board. Sort of the second avenue is the community side. We've got the community sounding board with representation from folks from the City of Tumwater and participation at the public engagement meeting. And so our goal is to continue to send the City of Tumwater the design deliverables to review the development of the South Basin Boardwalk. So as a design partner, you're reviewing in lockstep as these boardwalks are being developed.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Swarthout.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I just want to commend your team, Anne, and the presenters here. It's just been an amazing process. Having lived here for several decades, being out there, you're a lake or not a lake person, has always kind of like divided the community. And going through this process, it just shows how government can work. And I just really appreciate all the work that's gone into this, and the fact that we may actually see this happen in our lifetime, and that it's just been a huge lift. And I just have you guys to nominate you for the Nobel Peace Prize, because this is really huge in our community that we are this far, and it's successful. So I just want to commend you all on your work on this.
Thank you. And if I may add a comment to that, we've had some meetings in Washington, D.C., and the partnership and the collaboration around this project, including the different cities, the county, the port, LOT, even the community, Squaxin Island Tribe, it has not gone unnoticed. And folks are saying we are doing something really special here to have all levels of government, including the tribe and the port. And I think there are a lot of folks that are excited to see us break ground too. And I really want this to happen in my lifetime, and I think it's going to happen. So thank you for those comments.
Great, thank you. There's been a lot of meetings, and so I really appreciate it, and I've watched how this has evolved, so. Any other questions? All right, thank you so much, and I will go ahead and let you all have the rest of your evening, and we will move on with our next item on our agenda. So thank you very much.
Thank you
And I'm
so
sure we'll
much.
be seeing you again shortly, so.
I hope so. Bye,
Bye,
folks.
everyone.
All right, next item is the budget workshop number 1, and Troy and Lisa will be presenting.
Yes, we're tag teaming tonight, Mayor, so thank you. So tonight is just the first presentation. Are you able to pull it up for me? Tonight's just the first presentation. Obviously, we're going to have a couple of other workshops as well as some public hearings. We don't yet have the budget compiled and ready to be distributed to you in the public, but that is coming hopefully very soon. And so tonight we just wanted to set the context for this year's budget process. We want to introduce some of the priorities and challenges that we've been experiencing and that we've observed. I'll be doing that. And then we do want to give you a little bit of a taste or a picture of the city's current financial condition. And that's where Troy is going to provide us with some information. So we did the budget a little bit differently internally as staff this year. In the past, it would go, the directors would work on their individual department budgets. Those budgets and a series of schedules would go to the city administrator, the finance director, and the mayor. And decisions would be made there, and the preliminary budget, mayor's budget, would be issued to the public. So this year, using our management team, one team concept, we instead had the same first step. So the directors first provided their initial draft of their departmental budgets. And then instead of doing a presentation in the corner office with just the mayor, the city administrator, and the finance director, we instead had each department director provide an overall description of their budget and its highlights to the entire management team. And that allowed for some good information. I think there was some good collaboration in terms of shedding some light for all of the management team members on the entirety of the budget, not just their individual component. And so from there, it has gone then to the next step where the city administrator, the finance director, and the mayor have been continuing to work collaboratively with the management team members to come up with the final preliminary budget, which is what we hope to bring to you here very shortly. We did use the updated strategic priorities and goals that the council adopted earlier this year. And I do feel like our process has really helped all of us to come to a collective understanding of what our opportunities and our challenges are moving forward. So in terms of setting a bit of the context, we wanted to really talk about Tumwater and the community and the fact that it's growing and diversifying. And I know that is a known factor, and I know it is you know, an understood thing that that we all are experiencing, but we really wanted to put some numbers and some context around the growth in our community as well as the growth in our organization. So Tumwater, in terms of population, is growing. We have grown, we've more than doubled in size from 2000 to 2020. Between now, 2024 and 2030, we are expecting to add approximately 5,000 more people, and then a significant amount more between 2030 and 2040. All of this data and information that I'm going to be giving you in terms of the demographic information and the population information is from our work with the TRPC and the collaborative work that our planners do in that group. So in terms of population growth in Thurston County, Tumwater is experiencing a rate of growth that is second only to the city of Yelm. So our total numbers may be lower in some cases, but our rate of growth is actually second highest in Thurston County. The good news from my perspective, and I believe our collective perspective on the management team, is that we also are a different and diversifying community. So cultural diversity is increasing in Tumwater. Some of the data that we've looked at in terms of the Tumwater School District, for example, in 2014, 2015, they had roughly 75% of the students in the Tumwater School District identify as white. Today, just 10 years later, that number is 66%, which means that we are growing in our diversity, not only in the school district, but the numbers that you see on the right-hand side of your slide are show that increasing and diversifying population from 2010 census, then on the top of the right-hand side, and then into 2020 data on the there we go, on the bottom right-hand. So we look at this as an opportunity and a good thing for our community. And recognizing also, though, that it means that the way in which we deliver and provide services and the expectations of our community also are changing.
Lisa, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Is the military number in there?
I do not believe there is a specific military number in that population, Councilmember Jefferson, but I believe I can get that for you.
Okay, thank you, Lisa.
All right. Okay. So in terms of housing units, more people means that we need more houses, and essentially we have an expectation of approximately 3,000 more housing units that we're going to need to find space for between 2024 and 2030, which is just 6 short years away. And then another several thousand more after that in terms of the 15 years from 2030 to 2045, 6,000 more in that 15 years after 2030. This need and this obligation in many ways to accommodate all those housing units is a significant challenge for our community. You all have been hearing about it in the comprehensive plan update, and it is an ongoing issue that we are going to need to be working towards addressing. We are seeing increases in both employment as well as income in Tumwater, which also has the added benefit of generally increasing our taxable retail sales. There's conservative estimates in terms of population. The number of jobs in Tumwater is approximately 27,000. We're projected to have more than 37,000 jobs by 2045. Our major employment sectors include state government, healthcare, retail, professional services, as well as some manufacturing. We are seeing that our household income, at least as measured by TRPC, shows that more than 50% of households in the city have an income of $75,000 or more, and nearly 40% have an income of $100,000 or more. On the other hand, and this is not on a graph, but there is still a significant portion of households in the city that are cost burdened, and they have a difficulty meeting needs. We've seen some presentations over this last year to that effect, and poverty rates in Tumwater are generally holding steady at roughly 9% over the period of time from 2012 to 2021. So in terms of our taxable retail sales, generally we've seen a growth of from $500 million to $1.23 billion between 2013 and 2020. So and then we wanted to also provide some information to you about the city as an organization. Of necessity, we have also changed significantly in the past 20 years. So the data on the left is some information that we have put together that compares what our numbers look like in terms of 2004 versus 2024. Some of these numbers are calculated, some of them are well documented, and then the numbers for 2024 are projected where that is appropriate based on our existing numbers to date. So you can see our FTEs have grown. We've added over 100 acres of parkland. Our permit processing, we've increased our permit processing by almost 1,000 permits annually. Calls for service for both the fire department and the police department have increased significantly. And then our water and sewer customers, the people that we provide those services to, have really increased pretty significantly as well. And so over time, these changes in our community and in our organization have created and have resulted in a significant strain on city staffing resources. The table on the lower right is intended to give you a snapshot, for example, of some of those changes. I think the number of permits processed by employees, we basically have in 2004, we had 12 employees processing 968 permits. And in 2024, we only have 13 FTEs in community development, and they're now processing and projected to process 1,900 permits in 2024. So that's an example. The acres of parks that are being maintained by our employees. In 2024, we had 4 employees that were maintaining that 130 acres of parks. And in 2024, we have 5.5 people that are taking care of that 230 acres of parkland. So the other thing that we've seen in terms of just the numbers of associated with the work that our staff are performing, there's an increasing expectation and complexity to the services that we're providing. Permitting staff, for example, there's not only is there 1,000 more permits, but the regulations that our planners are having and building officials and inspectors are having to understand and evaluate and issue are changing significantly in perspective. And there are, in terms of our parks maintenance facility, there's more technical equipment, there's higher safety standards, there's greater expectations on the part of our community. And so there's been this ongoing need to provide a higher level of service and to do that with staffing resources that haven't necessarily kept up with those expectations. So we've had some resulting challenges, and this is really where I believe the process that we've gone through to date to develop this budget have brought these 3 primary challenges to light. We are currently understaffed for our existing demand. We are not as easily providing services as we have been in the past decades. In order to, not only are we going to need to deal with that existing understaffing issue, we're also going to need to ensure that we're preparing to deal with all of the new growth. So the increase in demand, at the same time, we're trying to make up that deficit in spending, or excuse me, in staffing. And then because in part we haven't had the staff to do the jobs of maintaining our assets and our facilities as efficiently and as effectively as we'd like, there is a backlog of repairs and maintenance, primarily in our parks and in our facilities. But in general, there's a need for us to take an intentional and serious look at how we're going to maintain the assets that we currently have and bring them up to an acceptable standard in order to avoid more costly situations where we might have to replace an asset which is infinitely more expensive, as you well know. So our challenges that have developed over many, many years. The changes that we've experienced in our community have happened over many years. And we believe that the response and the strategy to address those changes and our challenges are going to take a multi-year approach as well. So we're really looking at trying to stabilize and balance our work here in 2025-2026 budget. We want to address gaps between funding and needs wherever possible. We want to do what we can in terms of funding the services and programs within our means. We will be deferring some of our needs out into the future, the lower priority needs. We will need to consider potentially changes to the services that we offer. And we are going to have a well-rounded approach to addressing this issue by exploring options for revenue that may be out there that we could refine and begin to take advantage of. In 2027, 2028, we hope to, let me back up. So one of the strategies in 2025 is also to hire a municipal finance professional to help us understand and develop tools and processes that can help us address funding shortfalls and explore more long-term funding options. And the changes that that person helps us identify will help inform and be realized as we move into the 2027-2028 budget, where we're realigning and resetting and implementing our various strategies. And then we hope then that sets us up to a 2029-2030 budget, biennial budget that really is refining and sustaining the organization with the new tools and processes, so we can continue forward and hopefully be able to better identify and manage potential shortfalls as they're occurring, so we don't have to go back and make large-scale changes in the future. That would be the goal.
I think Councilmember Dollhoff has a question.
Thanks, Mayor. Administrator Parks, can you just help me understand? So I've been getting questions in the community. Other jurisdictions have had their budgets presented. So I've been getting questions, how are we? How are we? Looking at this slide of balance and stabilize for 2026, are you saying that we have a pretty significant deficit? Like, what does this mean?
No, it means that we have pretty significant challenges and needs that are going to need to be addressed over time. And when we get to Troy's presentation, he's going to be able to identify a little bit more for you the specific financial condition of the community.
I'll wait for
Did
Troy.
that
Thank you
answer
so
your
much. No, it didn't. I'll wait for Troy. It's fine.
Councilmember Kathy?
Yes, Lisa, I was just wondering if you could give an example of if we're hiring another person at an executive level, that's more costly than taking care of our parks or doing the other things where you said that we're, we need more people to help do the things that were on that list. What are some of the actual job? What would this person do that translates to something that we would notice or that we would discuss as council? How does it get into making everything smoother or better?
Are you asking specifically about the assistant city administrator, or are you curious about the other staffing needs?
Financial consultant, I think.
Oh, the financial consultant.
Yeah. Yes, financial
Is
consultant.
that?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. So what we hope to do with the financial municipal finance consultant is to take all of our great ideas and our thoughts and apply a deeper level of technical expertise. And I believe that there will be suggestions for both short term, how can we resolve and catch up in reasonable, fiscally responsible ways in the short term, And then they also are going to be helpful to us in understanding what our long-term options and alternatives are. And it's something that a number of jurisdictions have done recently. This particular consultant, for example, did the same exercise with the city of Covington. And it was really helpful in terms of understanding from a big picture standpoint, all of the various challenges that we see coming down the road in terms of growth and needs, and identifying different alternatives, both innovative as well as traditional, that we can take a look at and understand and refine what's going to work best in the case of Tumwater.
Does this have more to do with technology, or does it have to do with people, or does it have to do with new programs? Or I'm still vague about, you know, what this fairly high level person is going to do to add to some of the things that you have presented to us.
It's going to be comprehensive, so this person will help all of us work collaboratively to identify all of the various components of the challenges that are facing the city, bringing to bear options and alternatives based on experiences throughout the state of Washington with other local governments, and understanding where there may be options to help us navigate a path forward.
I still don't understand it and see this great need for this, but maybe I need to listen to more about what we need to balance and stabilize, and I'll just keep listening.
I have a question.
Okay.
Yes, Councilmember Jefferson.
Yes, City Administrator. Balance and stabilize, does that mean investing in personnel? Because I see there's more responsibilities, same amount of personnel. So is it hiring more? Is it pay? So that balance and stabilize, what exactly is that? So is it personnel investment? Because I'm looking for with my HR hat.
Yes. Yes to all of the above. The next slide, when we get there, talks about what the priorities are that we have been focusing on in this budget process. It includes substantial market rate increases for the folks that work for the city of Tumwater who are not currently represented by a union. Our unions have done a fabulous job of keeping track of and keeping up to, generally speaking, with our market and our comparable cities. And we need to do the same for our existing non-represented folks.
Okay.
We also have a significant staffing resource request. You had a presentation last week, I believe, or last work session, I believe, on workforce planning. We've asked the directors late last year and into earlier this year to tell us what it will take for them to complete and perform the work and the duties that they're obligated to perform on behalf of the city of Tumwater.
Right.
And staffing resources are a significant component of need in terms of that workforce planning.
Right, but can I just suggest to kind of simplify it? So under balance and stabilize, investing in personnel or realign and reset. This way it's easily understandable. Just a suggestion.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Councilmember Von Holtz.
Thank you. I guess this is my first budget process with the city, so I really appreciate the information, but I guess, and it's the balance and stabilizing to me that's causing me some, I don't know whether it's concern or just, were we unbalanced? Did we start out with an unbalanced budget? Is that how we got here? And without seeing a budget, it makes it a little bit, everything's very vague. So forgive me for being confused.
Yeah. So intent of the words balance and stabilize do not mean to imply that we are somehow unbalanced and unstable. So I apologize if that's the impression. We have significant resource needs that in order to meet the expectations of our community in terms of the services that we are providing, and that is across the board. So we have significant staffing needs, we have significant needs in terms of deferred maintenance, and we have some really significant steps that we need to take in order to ensure that we are able to accommodate the growth that's anticipated across the horizon, the future. So this is a preliminary presentation. The details will come much more thoroughly in the next 3 presentations to you over the course of the next several weeks. And I am happy to answer any questions after we, anytime in between those different work sessions. Technical difficulties. Hang on just one moment. There we go. So the 2025-2026 budget priorities are, as I mentioned, we need to bring our non-represented staff up to market rates. We need to address the staffing needs that have been identified by the departments in terms of what they need, again, not only to provide the services that we are asking of them today, but also in looking into the future. There are these deferred maintenance, primarily in our parks and in our city facilities, that need to be addressed. We are intending to explore and implement various revenue options that may be available to us, both in this budget as well as working again with the municipal financial advisor in early 2025 to identify additional opportunities for revenue increases, financing strategies, expense reductions, and the like.
Councilmember Dolha.
Thank you, Mayor. And Mr. Parks, could you remind us, our total staff is like 234. How many are represented and how many are not represented?
I'm going to guess. We have 237 FTEs. I believe approximately 60 of them, 65 of them are non-represented. 110.
So the majority
are non-represented.
Okay.
Sorry.
110 not represented.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you.
So I'm going to, unless there's any other questions, I'm going to turn it over to Troy here, and he can give you the update on the financial condition.
Okay, good evening, everybody. So this isn't the best slide because it's just got a lot of words and numbers, but if you kind of look across, we're going to start off with the financial results from 2023, and I apologize if this is a little small. The next graphic is going to, or the next slide is going to give you a graphical picture that I think is better. But this shows budget to actual for 2023. Beginning fund balance is the BFB, the revenue, the expenditures, and the ending fund balance. The big difference here, when we developed the 23-24 budget, we were expecting a small recession. And so that's how we budgeted for it. The revenue that we put in the budget reflected a decline in revenue from the previous year. You'll recall, coming through and out of COVID, 2020 through 2022, sales tax revenues were extremely strong. New construction was just going berserk, and we figured that was all going to slow down, at least to some degree. And that didn't happen. And so that's, if you look at that revenue line, in fact, I'll just advance to the next slide so you can see this better. The green bars are the budgeted amounts, and the blue bars are the actual amounts for 2023. And so for beginning fund balance, we were really close. You can see revenue, the actual revenues that came in were much stronger than we had anticipated. Expenditures were pretty much right on track. And and those extra revenues that we weren't planning on resulted in a higher ending fund balance than we had planned on. So moving into 2024, and let me just go to the better, more visual slide. Same things here. The green is the budget, the blue is the actual, and obviously we're not through all the way through 2024 yet. So part of this is actual numbers up through about August, and the rest is a projection where we think we're going to land at the end of the year. So again, since we're on a biennial budget, we predicted, or we estimated beginning fund balance for 2023 and 2024. So we start 2024 with higher than anticipated fund balance. Revenues again came in stronger than we thought they would. Expenditures pretty close, and that results in an ending fund balance again higher than we thought.
Councilmember Althauser has a question.
Do these budget numbers, is this like our operating budget, or does this also include like capital and transportation programs?
Very good question, and thank you for that. This is general fund only. So this is not transportation or the CFP budgets or utilities, just general fund. So fire, police, parks, and all the administrative, and streets, but not the humongous capital projects in streets like the roundabout.
Thank you.
I have, there was a question earlier about, some uncertainty with city budgets and things like that. And I have heard from many colleagues where they're starting to see some of their tax collections decline. We are starting to see sales tax slow down a little bit. It's not declining. It's just not growing as fast as it was, is what we're seeing right now. So we are in good shape at this point in time. This is a revenue and expenditure trend. So the green line is the revenues, the blue line is expenditures, and this is from 2013 up to where we think we're going to end 2024. You'll see between 2019 and 2020 on the expenditure line a sharp decline there, and that was due to the COVID pandemic coming, and the management and city council made some budget cuts to slow down spending because we were unsure at that time what was going to happen with revenues. First time any of us had ever been through this. There was a lot of uncertainty out there. Stay-at-home orders, are people going to shop? Luckily for us, a lot of people shopped at home, and so we got sales tax from that. And even our brick and mortar stores seemed, for the most part, to do really well. You can see quite a gap there so we restored many of those budget cuts after it became apparent that revenue was doing just fine, and we didn't need to continue with budget cuts. However, we were in the midst of the pandemic still. The job market was insane. Wages in a lot of industries went up way faster than we could keep up with. That's one contributing factor to the non-rep salary survey we're talking about. But expenditures are now starting to catch up with revenues, and they're pretty close. So just a few items on the national economy. As I mentioned earlier, we were expecting a recession when we developed the 23-24 budget. We're not expecting that now. Now, just because I say that, I mean, my crystal ball doesn't work, but these are kind of, yes, knock on wood, thank you. Anything can change and happen, but things are looking pretty good. On the good side of things, we're seeing inflation receding. Unemployment is still very low. The Fed just last week made a big interest rate cut. They've been talking for a couple of years about the Fed trying to have a soft landing on the economy as they combat inflation, and now that's looking possible. And the stock market is hitting record highs. On the downside of things, while we've seen inflation receding, prices are still really high in a lot of sectors. We do see unemployment rising, not drastically though. It's rising from what it's been, but it's been at record lows. And so we'll definitely keep an eye on that. We know that consumer debt is high right now and consumer demand has been cooling a little bit. So other things we'll keep an eye on. We'll keep an eye on our sales tax collections and everything else like we always do. And of course, this is a presidential election year, so there's always a lot of speculation and uncertainty around that. And more locally for the city of Tumwater, going back to some of the numbers we just talked about in the general fund, we've got a very high fund balance right now. We've got almost no debt, and our revenue outlook is still looking strong. Even though the sales tax collections are starting to flatten out, they've been on a very steep trajectory lately. So it had to flatten out at some point. On the downside, as Lisa was mentioning, we've identified a lot of needs. The non-represented salaries, need for additional people, and the need for deferred maintenance. So, but we're in a really great starting place to address those needs. Yes.
Councilman Rollhauser.
In terms of the fund balance being high, I remember, I seem to recall that there's sort of like a ballpark standard you want to have. Is it 3 to 4 months of operating expenses, or like what do you shoot for? And so I assume that we are higher than sort of that standard.
Yes, we're definitely higher than that standard right now, quite a bit. About 3 years ago, we updated our financial policy from an 8% reserve, which is about a 1 month reserve, to a 17% reserve, which is about 2 months. So that's the 2 month reserve has been a best practice from the Government Finance Officers Association for many, many years now. And it's great that you asked that question, because that association is starting to rethink that and starting to think, well, maybe we need even a little bit more than that, just to, because you never know when a recession is going to happen, or a pandemic, or or some emergency. And so
if we're projecting a $30 million end fund balance at the end of 2024, that's more like 9.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Okay, and speaking of ending fund balance, this is a trend of where it's been. For the most part going up, but some years it does go down. And you may recall from when we talked about and had these budget presentations for the 23-24 budget back in 2022, we were again anticipating recession. And also, because of that, we weren't planning on cutting any staff or really cutting expenses. We were just going to dip into our fund balance to help us ride through that. Since the recession didn't happen, as you can see, the fund balance kept going up. And so that does, again, put us in a really great position to start trying to address some of these needs. And we've pretty much talked about these by this point, but anyway, we're finding we are under-resourced personnel-wise, the deferred maintenance, and then also space at City Hall. We're kind of busting at the seams now, and so we need to start looking at where do we put people as we hire people. And that, Councilmember Agabi.
Can you go back to that previous slide, please?
That one?
This one?
Yes. So in near total dollars between 2023 and 2024, I understand that 2024 is projected. That's not even 5 million, is it? It's more like between 3 and 4 million, right?
30 million.
Yeah, the difference
total
between
fund balance.
2023. So my point is the difference between 2023, which we know, and the projected for 2024 is about or $5 million. So that's not that much, right? Or am I looking at it sideways?
Well, certainly there was a bigger increase in our ending fund balance in 2023, as you can see there. That you're correct. The fund balance increased in 2024 by a smaller amount than it did in 2023. And so yes, it's not a huge increase. In fact, that's probably, that little difference there is probably more like $1 million.
Did that answer your question, Councilmember Gabi?
So, yeah, so the follow-up question would be, if at the end of 2024, we have the actual revenue, where would that put us in 2025? Because that's not something that, it doesn't really put us in the black.
Yeah, we're very
given
much,
that,
very
yeah.
much. So the ending 2024 with about a $30 million general fund balance does very much put us in the black. It's the highest our fund balance has ever been. It's a really great starting place. And this ending fund balance for 2024, of course, becomes our beginning fund balance for 2025. And so that's where we'll start the new year and the new biennium.
But isn't our expenditure equal to that? Right now, or wouldn't that be at first quarter of 2025?
Our expenditures right now for the year in the general fund are about $40 million.
So, okay, so this is what I'm getting at. I'm getting at our expenditure and revenue. So the difference between the two would be, at least looking at our ending fund balance and our expenditure, that would be kind of more of the same, right? That's what I'm getting at.
Okay, gotcha. Yes, let me see if I can back this up. Yeah, so you can see on this slide here comparing the revenue and expenditures for 2024, they come very close. So in this one, the revenue is just slightly higher than the expenditure at the end of 2024. So you're right, it's almost the same.
Thank you.
Councilmember Dalhouse?
Thanks, Mayor. Troy, in past budgets, we've always had staffing challenges, right? Like we hear that every time. That's ongoing and will be ongoing. So I'm not so concerned about that, just the strategy of how to address it. I'm interested in seeing. We used to do, it was back in the day with Councilmember Tom Oliva, a graph that had us going off the cliff, right? So projecting if we keep going this way, do we still do those graphs of that forecasting and future cliff?
We did as recently as last biennium when we were doing the budget. We kind of, Lisa and I and the mayor kind of talked about that, and we kind of felt like, we show that the structural, that structural deficit, which is the 1% property tax cap, that limits how much we can raise that. Obviously, a 1% increase in that particular revenue can't keep up with the demands of a growing city. And so there is that structural deficit where the state laws have made it hard for cities to keep up. So that deficit is still there, but I don't know for how many years now we've been showing the graph of the cliff, but we haven't hit the cliff. And so we're trying to go kind of a different direction, and certainly the structural deficit is still there. But if we're doing things well, and if the growth continues, that we kind of keep kicking that cliff down the road a few years, and what we've seen again. You know, I think the last time we showed that graph with the cliff, it was maybe by 2030, we're falling off the cliff, and now that's out somewhere to 2033 or farther.
Right. I still think I prefer to see it, right? Because it lends to the conversations of what Administrator Parks was talking about, wanting to hire another person in the executive branch. So for me to understand the need, where I'm seeing the need of our frontline workers providing utilities and services, I'm not seeing it in the executive branch of government. So for me to understand that, I need to see that cliff, right? Because it is an ongoing conversation, but I need that context to understand why I should vote for something when I'm not seeing that graphically, numerically.
Yeah.
So that's just my feedback.
Yeah. I have a question.
Councilmember Jefferson?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Council.
So Troy, what you just said, along with this graph, is why we need to hire that or look at that municipal finance expert. Correct? City administrator?
So I think I can take a shot at answering that, and if I don't do it well, then Administrator Parks can jump in. So the person that she mentioned hiring would not be a city employee, it would be a consultant. And it would be a municipal advisor to help us look at help us look into the future and look into what our possibilities are for raising revenue. So it's and really the kind of the result of that, similar, not too different from other studies that the city does for other departments. We would walk away with a 10-year financial plan and strategies and a model that we could use going into the future.
Excellent. So along with that line that shows us going off a cliff, I would like to see a slide on the duties and the responsibilities of this finance expert in the future, if that's, thank you.
Sure.
Councilmember Dalhoff?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess along the lines of that, I thought that was years ago when we were looking at hiring a sustainability coordinator and an economic development, that was the goal of the economic development person. So now how is that? Future discussions, but why is that being pulled off I think the economic, you've split that into two positions already. I thought that was a whole point of the economic development person, is to take that on. So I might be missing something, but I look forward to future conversations about that, of all those positions laid out.
The economic development person and that function really talks about strategies for growing the economy of the overall community. This financial person will be looking specifically at the finances of the city and looking at our legally available and potential financing strategies and opportunities for increasing revenue, opportunities for managing the finances of the organization efficiently and effectively, and looking at it on a 10-year timeline. It's important to have that extended look. The tools that this person will help us develop that will be Tumwater specific are going to be of huge help to the individual department directors in understanding how they could run different scenarios, similar to what the water utility is doing on some of its work with Carollo, is developing a structure within it which they can project, for example, their revenue and expense needs, and they can run different scenarios. If we do this, what happens to our revenue or our expenses and our bottom line? This would be the same thing. This person would do that same thing. The economic development function is it's a larger community focus, so it's looking at business retention in terms of helping our businesses and our community finding success, which then helps us increase revenue by virtue of increased sales tax and increased siting of businesses and manufacturing, family wage jobs, those types of things. So it's a similar but different function.
Got it. I appreciate that background. And I think those are a lot of elements that should be in the comprehensive plan element for economic development. And I look forward to seeing that all listed out. And so I can send you, Lisa, my comments directly when that comes out. Thanks.
Great. Okay, so next steps. This is the first of several budget workshops. We'll have more coming in the next couple of, well, more this month. No, not this month. This is the last meeting this month. More in the next couple months. Part of the budget process, we'll have 2 public hearings. We'll be bringing the regular property tax levies to you. I have 2 there because there's one for the city and one for the Metropolitan Parks District. And so you'll see both of those. We'll be having the fee schedule adoption, all leading up to adoption of the final budget in early December.
And I think that's all from us, unless there are further questions.
Any additional questions? All right. So with that, we will move to Mayor City Administrator report, and I will start out with the City Administrator.
I don't have anything specific this evening, Mayor.
And I really don't either, other than reminding everyone Fall Fest this weekend. The following weekend is the cleanup drop-off, if I'm doing that in the correct manner. And that'll be at City Hall, and that'll be the following weekend. So we have some events coming up, and council is certainly welcome to participate in those. So we definitely need volunteers. So if anyone wishes to do that, that would be great. So with that, we are adjourned for the evening. Thank you, everyone.
I'm gonna hang up the phone.